Aloha there, Post Geek Singularity crew, and Rob Servations himself. This is I, Trinidad, the Island Man, your Island Man, here just saying hello, Rob, from this post-COVID-19 world. Just saying, it's been a while since I threw out a video message to you. I don't really have anything great and fantastic to say to you or the rest of the Post Geek Singularity crew, but I just wanted to say, thanks for being around, Rob. Thanks for hanging around, despite, your much publicized Twitter debacle that took place. And as I wrote in the chat, I can completely see why you are taking a break from your main Twitter account. But I'm glad that you did not give up either on the Campia show, and especially not on your show, or the wonderful With Your Soulmate, Elizabeth, on whining about movies. I have truly enjoyed both sets of shows, and I'm sure, like everyone else, am looking forward to the wonderful Sophie's Choice with Sophie and Elizabeth, produced by the fabulous Robert Meyer Burnett. So just let us know when that's going to drop and how you're going to do that. We can't wait. All of us are waiting, hungry, Rob, for more of your work, including what dropped yesterday, the 16th of June, The Hills Run Red, which I've ordered and am waiting in the mail for. So, no, I didn't pre-order it, I'm sorry. But I am ordering it, and it is ordered, so don't you worry about that, Rob. So, but to the rest of you, and you, Rob and Elizabeth, just wanted to show off beautiful Hawaii, beautiful Oahu, here with Chinaman's hat in the distance over at the Kolau State Beach Park, and wish you well continued during this time of uncertainty, especially there on the mainland. Here in Hawaii, at least, there has been protests, rightfully so, but no violence or riots, fortunately, which all of us here on the island are truly thankful for. As we continue to, move on with our lives past the COVID-19 situation and just try to live with it as best as possible as businesses. And theaters will be opening up, in July and everywhere else, apparently. All right. I just want to say thank you for what you do, Rob, and you keep on doing it. All right. Thank you so much. This is Trinidad, the Island Man, your Island Man, saying mahalo, Rob, and to all of you, aloha.
Welcome, one and all. It is I, your Semolina of Cinnamon, your Dork of Disdain, your Arched-back of Frankenberry, the all-knowing master of time, space, and dimension, and, of course, your extraterrestrial Captain Kangaroo. For my fellow imagination connoisseurs who might be looking for science fiction, short story, and book recommendations, I've assembled a list of some of my favorites and posted it to my blog. It's not a complete list, but it should be enough to get you started. That's all for now. Have a butter knife.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of banterbury, and your chancellor of cheerfulness, and lest we not forget, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you with Robservations, Robcasting, and you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post Geek Singularity. I am Robcasting. What? Robservations, episode 450. If this were a DC comic, it would be giant-sized. And you know what that means? That means this is the halfway point between episode 400 and episode 500, which means I'm going to be doing a 500-minute episode of Robservations in the next 2 months, less than 2 months. That means sometime in August, ladies and gentlemen. I don't quite know when that is. I had 5 interviews for you last time. Still haven't put up Bill Sienkiewicz interview, which I'm going to do, the full-length version. I will be having 10 interviews with people. I've got some lead time, so hopefully we'll see what I can do. I have to put together an even better and bigger celebrity guest list for the 500th episode. Also for the 500th episode, like those 2 videos you saw at the beginning of this, thank you BL Alley and thank you Trinidad the Island Man. I've got a few more videos to show this episode. You can always send me videos for the 500th episode. Keep in mind they will be in probably August sometime, and it's no rush. I mean, you can actually send me videos a couple days before. I mean, I need like 3 or 4 days, but it'll be fun to play videos, and very, very exciting. And you know, before we jump into the topic, I've got a longer video. It's not that long, but this comes from Torrin Atkinson, our man Torrin, and here it is.
Survivor's Log, day 6005 of the pandemic. Running low on supplies. We're down to our last bottle of Space Corp brand reconstituted space effluent. Morale is low. It's my hope that I can raise some spirits with a little story. So I'd like to tell you today about my encounter with Mike Mignola and Bill Sienkiewicz. When I first moved to Vancouver in 1996, I was in a game group. We played Champions, the role-playing game. This is a superhero role-playing. My character was Rhinosferatu. Half man, half rhino, all vampire. After that game ended, I liked the character a lot. And I thought, what can I do with Rhinosferatu? Well, I was a big fan of Captain Carrot and his Amazing Zoo Crew comics back in the 1980s. And I thought, I'll make a series of animal superhero characters. I workshopped it a bit with my friend, and we came up with the World Wildlife Federation of Justice. Who do we have here? The heroes. We got Enormous. We got Shaolin Monkey, Metalligator, Octopussycat, Hardvark. This is Gorilla. And then the bad guys, we got, we got Salamander, Shockatil, Hypnopotamus, Dr. Gnucleus, Earthquack, Cardinal Sin, Tarmadillo, Velocelot, and of course, Rhinosferatu. Sorry for the reflection on the light there. I did a few things with these guys. Mostly it was just drawings on my blog. I decided to make a sketchbook. And I have a lot of artist friends. So I would go to comic book conventions, and so I would take the sketchbook and get comic book artists and just artists in general to draw Rhinosferatu. And this is the book. It's not full yet, but it's getting there. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I went down to the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland, Oregon. And Mike Mignola was a guest at one of them. And so I got him to sign my Rocket Raccoon comic books. And I also made him, this is a copy of the drawing. I gave him the original. This is my drawing of Hellboy and Rhinosferatu. And I asked him if he would be so kind as to reciprocate. And he drew me this, Hellboy and Rhinosferatu. And that was only the beginning. Here's one from Steve Ralston, comic book artist. This one's from Pia Guerra from Y the Last Man, personal friend of mine. She did one of the voices in the Spaceship Zero radio play that I mentioned, I think I mentioned in the last video. One of my favorites from Rebecca Dart. Here's David Peterson from Mouse Guard. Steve Sadowski worked on Justice Society. Johnny Christmas, don't know if you picked up recently the Alien 3 comic book that was based on the original script. Peter Bagg, or Baggy? I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. This one is one of my favorites from Stephanie Blakey, one of my peers in the animation industry. There's just so many, I couldn't possibly show them all. Simon Roy. There's James Stokoe. I think he's working on a Wonder Woman comic right now. Could be wrong. Just a couple years ago, I went to Fan Expo here in Vancouver, and here is Rhinos Fratu from Bill Sienkiewicz. Another jewel in my crown. Feather in my cap? I don't know what it is. It's an awesome drawing in my Rhinos Fratu sketchbook. Oh, I can add that I did do The Ominous Origin of Rhinos Fratu, four-page, completely caption-free comic book about how he became a vampire. I don't want to spoil the ending, but he did get bitten by a vampire bat, so that's fun. And I actually pitched the World Wildlife Federation of Justice to a couple different animation studios. Nobody optioned it, but I did draw out an animatic for the opening title sequence for the proposed Saturday morning cartoon. So go to worldwildlifefederationofjustice.com if you want to see all my drawings and animal superhero puns. So there you have it, as promised, my story of meeting Bill Sienkiewicz and Mike Mignola. That's all I have to report to you from the bunker, thousands of miles beneath the Earth's crust. Be safe, be awesome. Ya Cthulhu Fatagan, and I'll see you on the internet.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Torrin Atkinson with another one of his wildly entertaining videos. And as you all know, anyone can send me a video. Anyone. All you have to do is go to my website, theburnetwork.net. There's a place to send videos and letters that I read every day. But before we get into the topic at hand, something very interesting is happening, as reported by Ryan Parker in The Hollywood Reporter. And for all of you people out there, I know you're going to be excited about this. Ooh, Star Wars rarest action figure lands on eBay for a record-breaking price. And you all know, if you're a Star Wars collector, you know what that means. That means the actual rocket-firing Boba Fett, when they offered it after the Star Wars Holiday Special, before Empire Strikes Back came out. The rocket-firing Boba Fett has fetched more than $100,000 a few times. What is considered, by the way, this was reported today. It was posted at 6:26 a.m. by Ryan Parker on The Hollywood Reporter. The rocket-firing Boba Fett has fetched more than $100,000 a few times. What is considered to be the holy grail of Star Wars figures has landed on eBay with a price that is out of this world. And it is out of this world, believe it or not. A certified rocket-firing Boba Fett prototype is currently on the auction site for $225,000 for a 3 3/4-inch Star Wars figure. $225,000, almost $250,000. Should the figure be snapped up, it will set a new record. Originally, the figure was offered by the toy line Kenner as a mail-away special, Boba Fett being first featured as a cartoon character in the 1978 Star Wars Christmas special. However, the rocket-firing version never made it to kids, as that iteration was deemed a choking hazard before the toys were shipped. So disappointed children received a Fett with a glued rocket and an apology from Kenner. I was one of those kids, and I was disappointed. Do you know why this happened? Because the Battlestar Galactica toys that Mattel had made also had rocket-firing plastic, and kids, of course, shot them down their throats, and they ruined it for all of us. Frankly, I think that from an evolutionary standpoint, if kids are shooting rockets, plastic toy rockets down their throats, perhaps fate should just enter and cull the herd that way. No, I'm kidding. But, you know, they asked you to send in those missiles and they would send you Hot Wheels cars. I'm like, come on, man. Who do you think I am? Anyway, However, the rocket-firing version never made it to kids, as that iteration was deemed a choking hazard before the toys were shipped. So disappointed children received a FET with a glued rocket and an apology from Kenner, yet some of the unpainted prototypes were not destroyed and have been floating around the nerd black market for years, going for big bucks. Zach Tan, a Los Angeles-based toy collector who's brokering the eBay sale for the current owner, a man in Dubai, told ABC News he was confident the figure would not last long, even with the large price tag. The seller wants to remain anonymous. This kind of piece transcends collecting, he said. Every time it sells, it breaks another record because they just don't come very often. The eBay description reads, "Here it is, one of the true grails of vintage Star Wars with an amazing provenance. The item is currently in Dubai and will be shipped fully insured, or even better arrangements to meet up in person can be made." Almost a year ago, another rocket-firing FET sold for $112,926, breaking a record. ABC News reported. That record did not last long, as just a few months earlier, someone bought another one for $185,850. Wow, oh wow, oh wow. You know, that's amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 450th episode of Robservations. I know I said it should be like a giant-size episode. It isn't, but I did save some of these videos to play from people, from viewers, and I thought that was pretty cool. So, welcome, you imagination connoisseurs, to the 450th episode of Robservations, the show about something. And it's funny, I've got a couple letters I don't know if I should read, to be honest. I don't like that. I don't like that I have to think twice about reading letters, because I think that these particular letters, if I read them, people will see that as a tacit approval of what they have to say, which is not. But I want to say up front, I'm not going to read them right this second because I'm still deciding. I'm going to do spur of the moment. I'm still deciding if I can read them, but I don't like the fact that I even think twice about reading letters on the show. But in this day and age, one never knows, especially with recent controversies, and you'll know when I get to them what I mean. Now, as everyone knows, yesterday the news dropped that Michael Keaton was in talks to portray his version of Batman in a Flashpoint movie. And I had come out and said, I'm in favor of this. I think what's so great about that idea is that one of the things that I loved about the DC universe growing up, as I said yesterday on the last show, is that I love the DC multiverse. And the DC multiverse was actually created out of necessity because a lot of the characters in the DC universe, the early formation of the DC universe, were characters that fought in World War II. And so then how do you have those characters existing contemporaneously with other characters? So they did the Flash of Two Worlds, so Barry Allen and Jay Garrick could be introduced, and they created the concept of the multiverse. They had Earth 2, which is, if my memory serves, it was like 30 years behind our Earth. We're the prime Earth, but Earth 1 was the normal DC characters, and then, our contemporary, the modern characters, the modern iterations of the characters, and then Earth 2 was like 30 years behind, and that's where the Justice Society resided. So what I loved was when every year in the comics, the Justice Society and the Justice League would cross over. And I first fell in love with that idea in Justice League, the first volume, 114. It was a giant size issue, but it had a reprint of the original Earth 3 stories with the Crime Syndicate. Earth 3 had the evil version of the Justice League. And I loved those stories so much. And, it's on this side. As you can see right here, the Gundam is in front of it, but right here is the Crisis on Infinite Earths box that they released the 30th. I don't think it was the 30th anniversary, but they released a big box set that has 15 hardcover volumes, and it includes all of those crossovers with Earth 3, which I loved. I love those, Power Ring and Ultraman, and they were the evil versions, and I always loved that. So, as I explained, I love the idea of this leaning into the multiverse. I mean, obviously, the MCU announced Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and they've been talking about doing multiverse things in movies. Of course, the CW totally already there. They've had their multiverse crossovers, so the audience is prepped for it. But in order to do it on the big screen, you've got to do it in such a way. Now, we've already seen, of course, The Flash appear on The Flash, so that's pretty neat. And I really enjoyed seeing that happen. So there's already precedent for it. But the idea of bringing Michael Keaton in, I think, is a really great idea. Obviously, they're doing it into the Spider-Verse, so the idea of a multiverse now exists. But because the DC universe was really the first universe that embraced the idea of the multiverse, the idea of doing it as part of the DC cinematic universe, I love this idea. So again, this morning, Richard Newby, who writes for the Hollywood Reporter, he does a lot of work for their Heat Vision column. He's a big sweaty, as John Schnepp would say. He published a really interesting article today that I thought I would share with you. How Michael Keaton can retool the DC film universe, which I thought was really interesting because, as we all know, Wonder Woman's been working, Aquaman worked. We'll see the Snyder Cut is coming out, which is going to be, I think, which will finally finish Zack Snyder's DCEU trilogy, which I think is great. But bringing Michael Keaton into a Flashpoint film really opens up the DC cinematic universe and makes it, I think, viable in a way that it wasn't before. So Richard Newby wrote this article, and I wanted to share it with you. Holy Flashpoint, Batman! In news that was impossible to see coming from any direction, Michael Keaton will once again don the iconic cape and cowl in Andy Muschietti's upcoming. Andy Muschietti, of course, directed It, Parts 1 and 2. Very successful for Warner Brothers. He's a top-tier director now, not as successful yet as Christopher Nolan, but still amazing. And Warner Brothers is a studio. Obviously, I began my film career working at Warner Brothers in feature production. And when I was there, they had long-standing relationships with filmmakers. That's something Warner Brothers has specialized in. So they don't want to... Andy Muschietti's a top box office draw now as a director. It makes sense that even though the revolving door that has been The Flash, how many hundreds of directors have come and gone, how many writers have come and gone, we don't know. Now they have the writer of Birds of Prey, and they have Andy Muschietti on this property. So it looks like, I think, of all the starts and stops and fits and stops of this Flash project, I do believe that this version will finally see the light of day. Hopefully, Ezra Miller will still be the Flash. I quite enjoyed his portrayal. But then again, they could still make it work if Grant comes over to play the Flash, but right now Ezra Miller's playing the Flash. And I'm very happy about that. I really liked Ezra Miller's Flash. But anyway, Michael Keaton will once again don the iconic cape and cowl in Andy Muschietti's upcoming The Flash, starring Ezra Miller. Keaton, famous for playing Bruce Wayne Batman in Tim Burton's Batman and Batman Returns, is in talks to reprise the role in more DC films beyond The Flash, becoming an integral part of the DC film universe as the franchise opens up the doors to the multiverse. Keaton, who stepped away from superhero films after Returns, even parodying his tiresome association with the superhero in the Oscar-nominated self-referential dark comedy Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance in 2014, famously made his return to the world of comic books with the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Spider-Man Homecoming. With the door open for Keaton to return as Adrian Toomes, the Vulture, in future Spider-Man films, and the actor set to appear as the character in next year's Morbius as part of Sony Pictures' universe of Marvel characters, the actor has his feet firmly planted in multiple comic book worlds. The news of his return to Batman opens up numerous possibilities and questions as Warner Brothers looks to deliver on the full potential of its DC library and properties. After his ambitious two-part adaptation of Stephen King's It only makes sense that Muschietti would swing for the fences with his Flash film. Scripted by Christina Hodson, Birds of Prey, The Flash is said to be significantly inspired by Geoff Johns and Andy Kubert's Flashpoint event series, which saw Barry Allen thrust into an alternate reality after the Reverse Flash alters the timeline in order to get revenge on his nemesis. Within this alternate timeline, Cyborg is the world's greatest hero, while Aquaman and Wonder Woman war for control over the world. Superman wasn't found by the Kents, but government scientists who kept him in isolation away from the sun, where he grew up emaciated and powerless. And Bruce Wayne was killed instead of his parents in Crime Alley, leading Thomas Wayne to become Batman and Martha, this universe's Joker. Beyond the central event series, a number of miniseries fleshed out this world, creating a reality rich with possibilities, one that DC fans have hoped to see brought to life on the big screen one day, following an animated adaptation, Justice League The Flashpoint Paradox in 2013, and a very loose adaptation on the CW series The Flash in 2016. There's been plenty of speculation about the chance of the Flashpoint world coming to the DC movies, especially given the casting of Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Lauren Cohen as Thomas and Martha Wayne in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, who are dead ringers for Flashpoint's depiction of Batman and Joker. Rumors pointing to Morgan's reprisal of Thomas Wayne have circulated for months, as have fan hopes that Cyborg would return. If the film incorporates the warring alternate versions of Aquaman and Wonder Woman, The Flash could be far more of an event film than previously expected, falling much closer to the character count and scale of Captain America's Civil War than Doctor Strange, for comparison's sake. It would seem that Warner Brothers has seen the potential of having multiple iterations of its characters existing simultaneously, an area that DC Comics has thrived on for decades. The comic book multiverse is the next big idea in superhero movies and television, with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse leading the way, followed by the CW's Crisis on Infinite Earths last year, and the upcoming The Flash and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. For Warner Brothers, which has been in the superhero movie game the longest, there's perhaps no better response to the dissenting opinions about the best and most accurate versions of DC's most iconic characters than allow all of them to exist simultaneously. This means Keaton's Batman, Affleck's Batman, Robert Pattinson's Batman can all stand on equal footing. And if that's the case, then hopefully this all-encompassing approach extends to characters beyond Batman. So, how will Keaton's Batman fit in? And what role will he serve in the DC film universe? Burton's movies will presumably exist within a separate established timeline, and perhaps the Batman from that universe will be brought into the current DC film universe by way of Miller's Barry Allen. What's interesting about this is that it provides a means for Batman to continue to exist in the DC film universe established by Zack Snyder. With Zack Snyder's Justice League arriving on HBO Max next year and serving as Affleck's final turn as Batman, questions about the continuation of this franchise and continuity were raised given Affleck's retirement from the role. While some fans suggested The Flash could provide the means for Pattinson's Batman to join Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman and Jason Momoa's Aquaman in future Justice League films, all current signs point to Reeves' proposed trilogy being standalone, akin to Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy. But now it seems likely, given word that Keaton's Batman will be in multiple films, that any future team-ups between the Justice League will feature the Tim Burton version of Batman. So what happens to Affleck's Batman? Well, Snyder's original 5-film arc had Batman sacrificing himself at the end. Perhaps the events of his death will be moved up, and he'll fall victim to Darkseid, as he did in Grant Morrison's Final Crisis. This would give the character and Affleck a proper send-off, without creating continuity conflict or a world without Batman. By the way, keep in mind right now, this is only speculation. It has not been established yet that Ben Affleck will die in Zack Snyder's Snyder Cut. But who knows? Keaton's Batman is expected to serve in a mentor role, perhaps showing up in Batgirl, a project also being penned by the Flash screenwriter Christina Hodson. It's easy to imagine his role in this regard being similar to Bruce Wayne's in the animated Batman Beyond, though Keaton, younger than that series' Bruce Wayne, would likely still be able to get in on this action. It's impossible not to wonder if Keaton's role in the DC movie universe also promises a return to other familiar faces from Burton's Batman films. As awesome as it would be, there's a slim to none chance that Jack Nicholson would come out of retirement to portray the Joker once more, but the possibility of Michelle Pfeiffer returning as Selina Kyle seems possible given the actor's interest in reprising the role over the years. For decades, it felt like Warner Brothers was only scratching the surface with its DC properties or playing catch-up, but now they have the opportunity to dig deeper than they ever have before and tell stories impossible for Warner Brothers studios to tell in the same way. Warner Brothers has the benefit of multiple iconic versions of their characters, and rather than let that be a means to divide and confuse the goals of their cinematic universe, it is now a means to celebrate its infinite possibilities. So there you go. Now, this is what I was saying yesterday, and while I have no insider information about this, nor do I presume to know, what I do know is how studios think and how the business sort of works. Now, the studios they need precedent in order to make these kinds of fanboy decisions, or fangirl, or fan people, or however you want to identify if you're from the 28 known galaxies. And what a lot of people don't get about Hollywood is, and why Kevin Feige has been successful, is there's nobody that works at the studios that is also a fanboy, that is also, or fangirl, or fan gentle person. It doesn't compute. The studio executives are usually Ivy League educated business people that look good in terms of what is a publicly held company. Who are they going to hire? They're going to hire people from Yale and Harvard and Princeton. And that looks really good on their resumes that have, MBAs or something. Those are the people that get hired at studios. You're not going to hire a fanboy. So how does a guy like Kevin Feige make it to be head of the MCU? Well, as I pointed out dozens of times on this show, he worked on 13 Marvel movies in various capacities, so he saw what worked and what didn't work. X-Men, Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Daredevil, Elektra, a lot of Marvel movies, and he saw how it all worked, and he worked at Richard Donner's company. Of course, Richard Donner directed Superman, 1978 Superman. So Kevin Feige is unique in Hollywood. There's nobody else like him. There probably will never be anyone else like him in a position like that. Someone who has that much production experience actually making movies, who then moves over, takes over, and founds the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if you look at his track record, if you average out the box office gross of all 23 Marvel Cinematic Universe films, you're looking at $1 billion a film, which makes Kevin Feige the most successful producer in Hollywood history. And that's because he combines movie-making savvy with a studio head savvy, but most of all, he understands the source material better than any producer that's ever worked in Hollywood. There's nobody else remotely like him, which is why shared cinematic universes cannot really work. I mean, Into the Spider-Verse, the animated film, proved that, well, there you go. We'll see if that can be sustained. But now they're emulating what's going on. But Kevin Feige, remember, it's not like he doesn't have ties over at Sony. I'm sure he can make phone calls and suggest things and do things and all that. But what's really interesting is that Walter Hamada's crew, I mean, he's got people, of course, if they lean in. Jeff Johns is, I guess, no longer part of the films. Jeff Johns' problem was he wasn't a movie producer. He's a great comic writer. I have thousands of pages of his work on these shelves. But he wasn't a film producer. He didn't produce 13 movies. I mean, now he's getting better, doing things like Stargirl, and obviously he's been involved in TV. But he didn't have the kind of experience that Kevin Feige had. But they were both working together, which is at Donner's. I think they were there together. But so it's interesting to see. But I think this move by DC, what makes it so interesting is, here's one thing as a fanboy I have to explain to my fellow fan people out there. You can't expect literal adaptations of something. So the idea of having Jeffrey Dean Morgan, obviously play the comedian in Watchmen, to have him play Thomas Wayne is an obvious thing to do. But the problem is, the general movie-going audience, they don't know who Thomas Wayne is. They haven't read Flashpoint. They haven't watched the Flashpoint Paradox. They don't know, even though we would think it's cool, and they could explain it within a movie. From a marketing standpoint, you then have to explain to the general moviegoer, i.e., like my mom, who Thomas Wayne is. So that's a difficult thing to do, because there's a convoluted backstory. How do you explain that to regular movie-going audiences? Remember, the people that are watching this channel, you imagination connoisseurs, I don't need to explain that to you. Warner Brothers Marketing doesn't need to explain any of that to you. But there's a lot of people that don't know who Thomas Wayne is. So how do you get over that problem? Well, they have a great way to do it here. This is why it's such a genius move. You put Michael Keaton in as an older Batman from, say, 30 years ago, like the difference between Earth 1 and Earth 2. just like Kevin Feige looks at the Marvel comics for inspiration. They might not be direct adaptations. Civil War doesn't have the New Warriors in it, for instance, but they take the spirit of those stories and they incorporate them into the movies they make. So they already have all the good ideas. The good ideas come right from the comics. Now they adapt them to film, which is what you have to do. But the idea of making Michael Keaton a Batman, an older Batman, with an Ezra Miller Flash, you've basically done exactly what they did in all of those comic books that I loved. You have two different universes set literally 30 years apart. And different times. There was a Batman, just like the Justice. He basically becomes a Justice Society Batman. But the brilliance of it is, we've already had Michael Keaton starring in 2 Batman movies. So the entire movie-going audience that exists, a 4-quadrant movie-going audience, old fuckers like me, and then all the kids that grew up and people that grew up watching that Tim Burton Batman, all you have to do is show one shot of Tim Burton's Michael Keaton Batman in a frame with the Flash, and immediately you have a rabid audience of movie fans the world over. They need no explanation. Even my mom would be like, well, that's kind of cool. It's a done deal. It solves a lot of problems. It solves a lot of storytelling problems because you don't have to establish Thomas Wayne's backstory about how Bruce Wayne was killed and how he took over. He became Batman. That will eat up valuable screen time. But when you have a shorthand, that's a gift from a screenwriting perspective. That's something that becomes really interesting. And you put that Michael Keaton character, you put him on screen, people just know. They go bananas because anybody that has any cursory knowledge of Batman understands Batman stayed Batman all the way up through The Dark Knight Returns. So you don't have to explain anything like that. And now with what's going on with multiverses, whether it's on the CW show, whether it's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, whether it's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the audience, the film-going audience now, which 5 years ago, they didn't really understand what a multiverse was. I mean, look, I'm saying if you're not an imagination connoisseur, but everybody lives in the post-geek singularity. We do, but still the idea of multiverses is not necessarily known by the whole general population. But Michael Keaton is, and that's why this is such a great move on Warner Brothers' part, because what it does is what they needed, I think what the Warner Brothers DC universe needed was it needed that sense of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has created its own reality. But what DC has, if you look at their comics, and they sort of leaned into this with Aquaman in a big way, larger than life, goofy wackiness. The idea of characters like Bizarro or Mxyzptlk or whatever. These are characters now that you can now do. You could put Bizarro in a movie. If you have Michael Keaton in a Batman, and I'm not saying Bizarro's the best thing, you could do Solomon Grundy. There's a lot of characters that might not have fit in, certainly wouldn't have fit in with Zack Snyder's vision of the DCEU. But you take the multiverse route, all bets are off. You can do all kinds of things, all kinds of goofiness. You can, and I think, look, they've been setting us up. The end of Shazam certainly set that up, and Aquaman. I mean, if you do a Flashpoint movie, who wouldn't like to see evil versions of Aquaman and Wonder Woman leading the Atlanteans and the Amazonians in a war? I mean, what it does is it opens up the potentiality for what you can do with this DC universe. It is one heck of an idea. One heck of an idea. And while, there's still things to be ironed out, but if they're reporting on it in Deadline, I think they're pretty far down the road. And I think it's a really great idea. And I'm really excited about it. But again, what it also shows is that the thinking at studios is coming more along the lines of what the audience, the studios are finally realizing what the audience wants. And I think what's happening is, for instance, with Star Wars, when Disney took over Star Wars, Disney had its own agenda. Disney, from a corporate standpoint, they're like, okay, we're buying Star Wars, so we know that Star Wars as a property, they were thinking about it from a corporate standpoint, which is we have to think about it like how can we do with merchandising, toys, and theme park rides, and all of the things that Disney does. But what Disney did not do, because it didn't factor into their thinking, was, well, we have to make sure that we appeal to Star Wars fans, because the thought was that everybody's a Star Wars fan. How can we let them down? So I think that was ultimately what happened with Star Trek and Star Wars is the same thing. The people that took over, it was a combination of two different things. There was corporate interests that wanted to exploit a very venerable and very proven commodity, an IP in the marketplace. Both Star Trek and Star Wars, I'm not equating them together because they have, they both take place in space, but they have different audiences. But there was an overall mandate to take those properties and make them anew for today's audiences, which I think is a huge mistake. It was a huge mistake. And if you look at what they're doing with this Michael Keaton information and what they've been doing over at the Marvel Cinematic Universe is they've understood that we need to embrace the core appeal of these properties, and that's the nowadays we live in a world where it is the post-geek singularity. We go back to what made these properties great, and then we'll get people to come into the theaters. Star Wars, the fact that you never got an adventure with our old characters to sort of tie off, that there was not a movie with Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, R2, 3PO, that might have been one of the greatest corporate blunders in entertainment history. And I'm not making any judgments about the Disney sequel films here. I'm just saying that the idea that they had to reinvent Star Wars for a new audience and never give us an adventure with all of our characters, we're going to set it 30 years later, but you're not going to... I mean, that was a really stupid, monumentally stupid move, because you take the characters, the core of Star Wars, you can show them, and look no further than Ryan Coogler's Creed. You make a great film, you give Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone, one of the great, he gets to reinvent his role that he created 40 years previous, and he gets an Academy Award nomination. And you treat him with reverence. That doesn't mean, that was a perfect way to introduce new characters that are canonically relevant and still honor your old characters. Well, they should have done the same thing. Now, it's not about what you thought of the sequel movies, whether you like them or not. But by not doing that, what you did was you deprived a fan base for multi-generations of fans that were never given a satisfying conclusion. The way you dispatch Han Solo that way, the way you deal with Luke, the way you deal with Leia, they never all appeared in a scene together. How does that happen? That happens because some numbnuts at the corporate level said, well, we have to reinvent. These are old characters, but that shows a fundamental lack of understanding of why these properties work in the first place. Why do people fall in love with these properties? And it's no longer, Star Wars fans are not niche fans. The entire planet are Star Wars fans. And what Disney did from a corporate standpoint was they deprived multi-generations of fans from the most obvious story possible. Same thing is true of Star Trek. From a corporate standpoint, they're like, no, we need to reinvent Star Trek from the ground up. And so we're going to tell a prequel story, but not really. We're going to take your fundamental characters like Spock, and we're going to change him. We'll give him a learning disability. We'll make him flawed. We'll make him let's appeal to today's audiences. But that's a huge mistake. And what DC learned in trying to do that was they learned perhaps that's not what we should be doing. And Walter Hamada and his new regime at Warner Brothers is leaning into the comics, which is what they should have been doing in the first place. Now, that's not to say that Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, which is a staggering achievement as far as comic book movies are concerned, was a bad way to go. It wasn't, but it was understood that's what he was doing. But then when you start trying to do multi-universe stuff, I mean, look at how tonally different Aquaman was from, say, The Dark Knight. I mean, even though you could never imagine those two movies existing in the same universe, and it's okay that they didn't. And if Matt Reeves' Batman series with Robert Pattinson is also going to be in its own universe, well, that works too. Because even audiences are smart enough and savvy enough to understand that, hey man, we don't have to make it all work together. We've got our multiverse. And that's a great thing. So I really do see that using Michael Keaton as a fulcrum, you can do Batman Beyond. Because why not? You know, you can do a Batgirl movie. You could do whatever you want. Hell, you could do maybe Batgirl is Batman Beyond. Although I really like Batman Beyond. I really like the Terry McGinnis character. And I think, you know, that's a way of doing two things. Michael Keaton's Batman can appear in a Flashpoint movie because Flash is not in his universe. Flash goes back to whatever universe he's going to be in. And then the Batman universe with Michael Keaton, which already has two movies. So the Flashpoint movie becomes a sequel to Tim Burton's Batman. It also becomes a sequel to Justice League and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. It becomes a sequel to Zack Snyder's universe, and it can create a whole new universe. And the audience will be with you. We get it. We get it. All we want, like I always say, great stories, as Stephen King once said, great stories well told. Don't put your universe before your characters and stories. Because you have great stories and you have great characters, the universe will take care of itself, as evidenced by Into the Spider-Verse. So I'm very excited about this. I think it's really cool. We'll see where it winds up. I mean, obviously, I think that Michael Keaton is in a place in his career where he can just now enjoy it because he's obviously proven himself, and he's, I think, having a good time. And isn't that what everybody wants? At least I would think so. I got some letters, people. I've got some letters. Now, here we go. This one comes from Stubble McShave. Stubble says, "Hi, Rob. After the show the other day, when you brought up the subject of actors playing parts different from their own circumstances, such as non-handicapped actors portraying handicapped people, I started thinking, what about the portrayal of hobbits in Lord of the Rings? I can see many reasons for doing it the way they did, and some reasons why they could have used actors of a smaller stature. I don't think they did anything wrong, but I can see several arguments speaking in favor on both sides of the issue. First, the reasons for using little people, or whatever the PC term is, in the role of hobbits. They would have saved a lot of money, since they wouldn't have had to build sets in two scales, and a lot of props would only have to be made once in one size. They wouldn't have to plan and execute all of the advanced camera trickery to make it look like Frodo and the others were 3 or 4 feet tall. They wouldn't need to have the collaboration between the big actors and the small actors that were used in some shots, other than pure practical. There's also the argument that was in the focus of your show the other day, the representation and the opportunity for all types of actors. Those were some of the arguments for using little people in the roles of hobbits. Now to the reasons for using average-sized people to play the part of hobbits. If you go by pure talent, I'm sure there's a lot of talented actors of smaller stature, but I remember the casting news that were coming out in the late 90s. They had hundreds, if not thousands, of actors trying out for the parts of hobbits. As I said, there's probably several talented actors of smaller stature, but they were going for the best they could find. They also needed to work together as a group, which makes it even harder to find the right people. They didn't go for big names, rather they went for talent, although I don't like one of the actors that was picked. Sure, Sean Astin was known by some people for his days as a child actor, and Elijah Wood had done some semi-high profile movies, but they weren't exactly bankable names. Another reason for using average-size actors was probably the same reason as I gave in my previous argument that was against using average-size actors. I think that Peter Jackson is someone who thrives in problem-solving and coming up with ingenious solutions. I think that one of the things that made him want to do it in the first place was to build different scaled sets and making sets that could move with the camera, creating the illusion of Elijah Wood as a 3-foot-something foot tall character. If that challenge hadn't been before Peter Jackson, I'm not sure that he'd want to do the project. I think that the presentation of how they would shift scales of the sets was one of the selling points to the studio when Peter made his pitch. I think that the presentation of how they would do that was essential to the pitch succeeding. If they would have gone with actors that were small, there's a chance that the studio would think of it as Willow Part 2. Don't get me wrong, I think Willow the movie is good. Willow the person, on the other hand, is great. Also, he's a great actor. Also, I think the camera trickery was one of the big marketing points for the movie, and it was something that I was fascinated by. I often watch the awesome behind-the-scenes material on the extended versions of the movies. I wonder who produced those. Well, to be fair, I was just part of a big team. I was a worker bee on that one, but it was fun. I don't have a clear winner, whether they should have gone with talented small actors or talented average-size actors. I do, however, lean toward the average-size actors for a few reasons. I think the challenge to pull it off was something that worked as an inspiration for Peter Jackson, and I think the studio wouldn't have taken on the project without the presentation of the forced perspective. It should be mentioned that there were small actors portraying the characters in some shots, but they never had any real acting moments. Rob, as someone close to the project, what are your thoughts on the matter? Could they have made the movie with little people playing the Hobbit parts, or was the average-size actors and forced perspective essential to the studio saying yes? Stubble. Again, this is a great letter. I really enjoy what you're saying here. And for those of you who might not have ever watched this show, the other day I did a show about, we talked about actors playing certain roles. And like when Scarlett Johansson played a robot, an android, in Ghost in the Shell, which is an adaptation of a Japanese anime. A lot of people were mad that she was playing that role, that it should have gone to an Asian actress. Also, she was going to play a trans man in a biopic, and of course that biopic got canceled because she was cast as that person. And there is, the show is really all about, should actors, if you're abled, should you play a disabled person? If you're not trans, should you play a trans person? And this is a very interesting subject. And I think we did a pretty good job of examining it, even though I was told on one of the comments on the show that I was coming at it from a white... It's very interesting when people say, well, Rob, you're coming at something from a white, cis male perspective. As if that... What I really don't like about that is it's an attempt to invalidate my opinion by saying that what? That white cis males were the cause of all the world's problems for the last thousands of years, so my opinion is invalid. As I've often said, you can't trade one oppression for another, and I certainly can't change where I was born, how I was born, who parented me, So we really need to get away from this idea that people's opinions are somehow invalid, or that someone's experience or lack thereof makes their experience of the world somehow invalid. Everybody's experience of the world is valid because that's their experience. The problem is we haven't listened to so many other people's experiences of the world for so long. We need to start doing that. But you can't start listening to other people's experiences at the expense of other people, because then you're just as bad. What I've always said is we have to move forward together. But this is an interesting subject. Now, I mean, I would say this, and when one of the things that we are dealing with is that people want the world to be the way they want it to be. And if you're part of a minority, any minority, doesn't matter what, if you're in a civilization or you're in a culture where you are a minority member of that culture, and there's a predominantly other, I don't know, another dominant, whether it's a race, size, color, creed, sexuality, whatever you want to call it, if there's the dominant, you're always going to be marginalized because there's just more of those people. And I get the idea of wanting a voice. But the thing is, what I find very interesting is nowadays we're talking like everyone is, like if you have 100 people that and all 100 people decide I want to be in the film business, that they should get an opportunity to do that. And I would say that I think that's ridiculous. You don't just get a career. You have to bust your ass, and no one in Hollywood has an easy time of it. I mean, this idea, sure, there might be nepotism, but I have to tell you, I know all kinds of people in the film business, race, sizes, colors, creeds, genders, sexualities, and all of them had a very difficult road to hoe. It was tough for everybody. Getting into Hollywood is an insane proposition in the first place, and the people that make it in the business are facing impossible odds. They're facing impossible odds. It's not like somebody is favored over somebody else. If you get 20 white people in a room that work in Hollywood, they're going to tell you, all of them are going to tell you horror stories. All of them, because working in Hollywood is horrific. It is a horrific place where anybody who achieves success, even once you've achieved success, doesn't mean anything. When Mel Gibson directed Braveheart, he still couldn't get Passion of the Christ made. It's always a slog. It's always a horrible, awful place to be. And the people that are lifers, I would consider myself one, understand that. They know that most of the time, it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter what your gender is, it doesn't matter what your sexuality is. If you want to work in Hollywood and get projects made, you will spend most of your career banging your head against the wall, screaming in anger, pulling your hair out, wondering, why is this happening to me? And I guarantee you, every single person who works in Hollywood feels that way. So when it comes to your question, Stubble, I think what it comes down to is the decisions that are made in Hollywood. You're making a product to be sold. Some people want to make, widgets they use in construction. That's a guaranteed business. You know that so many widgets are going to be bought that year. You know how much you're going to make. You know how much you're going to manufacture. Hollywood is a dream factory, so everything they do, especially when you're spending tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, your decisions are always based on how do you get the greatest return. How do you get the greatest return? So I'll bet you, I know for a fact, that the idea was when you're making Lord of the Rings, it would be much cheaper to be able to hire 4 very talented little people. I don't know, I'm going to say little people. Now I'm not sure if that's politically correct anymore. I don't know. But you're going to hire, the thought is, let's hire 4 little people to play Sam, Merry and Pippin, and Frodo. I'm sure that would be the first. You could look at Willow and go, well, look at how well that worked out. That worked out well. But now you've exponentially made it more difficult for yourself. Not only are you going to hire little people, you have to find 4 little people that work together well, that are reasonably the same age, that have had the kind of experience that they're going to need to make you believe in them. That is a tall order. Because, first of all, it's not like there's the same amount of little people to be drawn out of, the same pool, percentage-wise, on the planet Earth. Especially that if you look at the actors that they picked, a lot of them had been working in the business since they were kids. Now, it's very hard to find any 4 people to play in an ensemble. Now, if you then ask to find 4 little people that are reasonably the same age, that have had the same kind of experience, it's near impossible. It's near impossible. And also, then the question arises, is there anybody here that's bankable? I mean, at least Peter Jackson could be like, well, Elijah Wood, he's been in movies. Sean Astin, he was in Rudy. I mean, there's so many different concerns. Now, there's a lot of people that want to say, well, little people need to have, we need to have representation. Well, a lot of the time, it's not that people are discriminatory towards little people, especially when you are trying to make a civilization of hobbits. It would be the one place, well, this is going to work. This could be really great. How do you find those actors? Are there enough? And then if there are, can you find enough that work well together, that are the same age? I mean, these questions become exponentially more difficult to answer when you're dealing with a group of actors that are a much smaller percentage of the actors that are working today that have the kind of experience. I mean, it's really, 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 really hard. These are practical concerns, and it's not because people are discriminatory. It's because it's not just whether you should cast these people or not. There's a bunch of other concerns, and then is somebody going to give you the money? The realities of the financial situation in the world. This is a problem that I when I see a lot of, there's all these questions about representation. There's other concerns that never enter into these conversations, and they are the realities that we as filmmakers or as people that want to work in Hollywood come up against all the time. Like if I want to make a movie, let's say I want to write and direct a movie that's $50 million. People would say, well, Rob, you've directed one movie that cost $1 million and you've produced a few other movies. Why would we possibly give you the $50 million to make a movie? Why would we do that? Well, that's when I have to step in and use all of the things that I know and beyond a shadow of a doubt convince those people that are going to make that decision that, one, I have this property, and two, I know exactly how to make it. And my odds of succeeding in doing that are 7,150 to 1. I don't know. C3PO odds. They're just insane odds. It's insane. It has nothing to do. I could sit there and go, well, you're being ageist. If I was 30, you would hire me. No. There is a reality of the world that needs to be taken into consideration. And what I feel or what you feel or what should be right, well, it's one thing to be able to have your voices heard. It's a whole other thing to think, well, if people... I mean, now there are things happening in Hollywood, and this isn't to put anyone down, but when they are trying to hire voices that are more diverse, that might have less experience, it's becoming a financial issue. So where do you draw that line? It's a really hard, it's a hard balancing act. And I'm not saying what's right or what's wrong, because it's a tough call. It's really hard. Now, you want to give people the opportunity, but if you think about it just based on population alone, how many people based on let's say Black America is 13% of our population. Well, of Black America, how many people want to go to Hollywood? In America, how many white people want to go to Hollywood? Who wants to go to Hollywood? You have to be a little crazy already to think that you're going to be able to succeed here. So already the numbers are they're so small in terms of your general population that you also need to take into consideration experience, because you can't just, we might want to hear other people's voices, but how do you afford that? How do you make that work? How do you take that financial risk? Well, you can't. Hollywood's one of the most risk-averse businesses in the world because the business itself is so damn risky. How many millions of dollars, how many tens of millions, how many hundreds, how many billions of dollars have been spent collectively in Hollywood on things that did not work? So it's a really tough question. And I don't necessarily have an answer for you. But it's certainly interesting. Certainly interesting. And so it's a tough call. This letter is from Ian Samuels. Rob and fellow Robservationists. There have been a number of sitcoms that were based around a newsroom. There have been a number of attempts, such as Great News as a series that started just 2 years ago on NBC, Frontline in Australia, and The Newsroom in Canada. But they seemed a poor copy of the British series Drop the Dead Donkey, which ran from 1990 and 1998. It was written by writing team Andy Hamilton and Guy Jenkin, who would go to gain success with the BBC family sitcom Outnumbered. Andy Hamilton started his career as part of the writing team behind Not the 9 O'Clock News and followed Griff Rhys-Jones and Mel Smith onto their own show, Atlas Smith and Jones. Oh, Alias Smith and Jones. You spelled it. Alias Smith and Jones. He would also write the comedy drama movie What We Did on Our Holiday, which starred Billy Connolly and David Tennant. In Drop the Dead Donkey, we're introduced to bickering news anchors veteran Henry Davenport and Sally Smedley, anxiety-ridden editor George Dent and his highly critical assistant Alex Pates, Field reporter Damian Day, who with his crew go out of their way to over-dramatize every report they film and send back to the studio, sub-editor and womanizer Dave Charnley, and cynical and surly PA Joy Merriweather. Finally, we have the super conservative chief executive Gus Hedges. The stories of each episode were based on events happening at the time of airing. This meant that they were often given a very satirical look at the world's events, while at the same time helping give some authenticity to the premise of the series. It's a fun, well-written satirical comedy and has made the recent attempts at copying this giant of a comedy pale in comparison. Well worth a watch if you can find it anywhere. Ian Samuels. Well, Ian, I've never heard of that. Drop the Dead Donkey. Well, that's something I honestly had never heard about that until I read your letter. Now I have heard about it. So thank you for writing in. And let's see. That's pretty cool. I would like to watch that show. This comes from Brian Eng. Brian Eng says, "Hey Rob, in today's episode, you said you're against white people playing black roles or old people playing young roles. But isn't that up to the director? Isn't he an artist too? Shouldn't he be free to make an artistic statement? Please read this article for the Post Geek Singularity." Thank you. Well, Brian, since you are a long-term member of the Post Geek Singularity, I will read this article. Wait, your link, hang on, is not working. It is not working, and I don't know why. Let's see, maybe. Nope. I have to ask you to send it again, sir. It's giving me a redirect notice, so I apologize for that. I can't read this article. But since you brought it up, look, it's not that I necessarily object. It's just, why would you want to hire an actor and make him up to look black when you have amazing black actors that you can hire? I mean, I think, remember, the idea of blackface doing some kind of a minstrel show was parody. It was disrespectful. Now, maybe, I mean, you could go back and someone could say, well, what about Al Jolson doing the jazz singer? Maybe they didn't think they could have, okay, I'm not saying that was necessarily the right thing to do. And if you're going to go back and you're going to judge that by today's standards, it would not fly. But I don't necessarily think that there was no parody involved there. I think there was an earnest attempt to do something. But at the time, how are you going to have that occur? I don't know. I think blackface is wrong. Now, people would say, well, Rob, what about in comedy? I think now with Jimmy Kimmel getting pilloried all over the internet for doing blackface, LaWayne's brothers doing White Chicks or something, I think there is an area of comedy where, depending on what's going on, I mean, blackface traditionally was used to make fun of an entire race, an entire subdivision of the human race, and in that sense, I think it's bad. Also, we have great black actors, so me as the viceroy of verisimilitude, if you've got great black actors, why would you ever think of not hiring them? And I agree with you. Yeah, it's up to the director. But in this day and age, we have complete acceptance of black people on our screens. Indeed, one of my favorite movie stars today is Denzel Washington. I'll watch anything that Denzel Washington is in. And you know what? When I watch a Denzel Washington movie, the first thing that I think of when I watch Denzel Washington is not that he's black. I think that he's a kick-ass actor, and I've been watching him for decades now, and I will tune up and I'll turn up and I'll watch anything he's in because he's a great actor. I don't even think about the fact that he's black, although he's frequently in movies where being black is part of the story. But when I watch Training Day, which he was amazing in, I mean, I think what we want as a society is we don't want to define people by that. We want to think of people, when you think about actors, you want to think about that guy or that girl or that person is a great actor. You don't want to think of Denzel Washington as a great black actor. I just like I don't think of Meryl Streep now. Well, she's a great older actress. I just think of her as Meryl Streep because I've been watching her since the 70s. You know, whether it's in Manhattan or The Deer Hunter, she's just a great actress. I don't even think of, like, when I first think of Meryl Streep, I think actress first. And I think that's what we want our world to eventually be. You know, we don't want to think of like, well, he's a great black athlete. No, we don't want to think that way. And that's what we need to get to a point where that's not a person's superficial defining characteristics should not, and when I say superficial, I mean from a purely, I don't want to denigrate anyone's experience about the world being black, but we tend to categorize people with superficial appearance, like she's a blonde, she's a brunette, or that person's black. I don't like that. I would much rather think of, well, what is the best actor we can get for the role? You know? And I just think in this day and age, like you were asking, I think anybody should, you know, of course, you can be, a director should be allowed to make whatever artistic statement they can make. But remember, you know, you are making a movie for a studio. So, yeah. Here is Omar 94, who writes a letter out every day. So here I'll turn it over to Omar. Hi, Rob. It's obvious that Hollywood is reactionary, as whenever something comes out as successful, others will often try recreating its success. I don't know why it's never occurred to anyone that if someone does something successful, try doing something else that has the chance of being successful rather than imitate what has been proven. For example, if someone did a science fiction epic that was a hit, rather than imitating it, someone else could try and make a fantasy epic that could also be a hit in order to compete. I don't see why studios are way too reluctant to take a chance on something that's new and untried, but will try and fail to recreate a hit movie. There's a piece of advice Frank Capra made when he received the AFI Life Achievement Award, which is start trends, don't follow them. And I believe that 100%. No one ever became wildly successful in Hollywood following trends. As far as I know, I think there have only been 2 times imitating what was popular was done successfully. The first was Alien, which was pitched as Jaws in space. The second was Speed, which was pitched as Die Hard on a bus. Thanks, and live long and prosper. But you know, those were just pitches. If you think about Speed, that was pitched as Die Hard on a bus, the idea of being trapped on a bus that can't drop below 50 miles an hour, that is an irresistible premise on its own. And Alien, while you could say it's Jaws, it really is more of a haunted house in space. I mean, people just do that to contextualize movies so people understand what kind of a movie it is. But I think Alien is very different than Jaws. You know, monster movies have been around since the dawn of time. But yeah, I mean, I understand when you pitch that way, a lot of people don't like that. They see, but I think when you're pitching it, when you have a quick pitch, then people, at least in their mind, can understand what genre it is. Like if you say it's this meets this, people go, okay, I get that. I understand. They might not know the specifics, but they understand what realm that the movie is in. That's why, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong. You know, I think still to this day, when I'm trying to explain to people what something is, taking one and another and let people in their minds imagine what that mashup would look like, I think that's okay. But yeah, I think Omar, I think you always achieve great success. It's ironic. You can achieve success in Hollywood by creating something new, but nowadays movies are too expensive, and what if something new doesn't work? There are no longer visionaries at the studio system. They can't afford to do it. If they screw up like that, it ends your career, so no one's willing to take that kind of a risk, unfortunately. This letter comes from Larry Wilson. Hi, Rob. You read a super chat about Don Cheadle complaining about his Miles Davis biopic not being able to Let me try this again. Let me have a little bit of this. By the way, if I haven't talked about AHA, this sparkling water, it's black cherry and coffee with caffeine in it. Man, I'm a fiend for this stuff. I can't. Oh. Hi, Rob. You read a super chat about Don Cheadle complaining about his Miles Davis biopic not being able to secure funding without having a white co-star. You replied how wonderful it would have been to have a Miles Davis biopic made by Cheadle. Well, great news. He did get the funding and made Miles ahead. However, he did have to have Ewan McGregor sign on as co-star to gain the finances. It was released by Sony Pictures Classic on Blu-ray in 2015. I own the physical copy. Only way to go. Yes, somebody reminded me of this. In case you missed it, it's available for rent on Prime Video. I think having you and Elizabeth review the film would make for an interesting show. Keep up the work, my Bondian bro and sis. Well, thank you. Yes, Larry, you know what? I did not realize that when that letter came in, and I after the show was over, I'm like, wait a minute. He did make a Miles Davis biopic, and I haven't seen it. But you are absolutely right, and I do want to check it out. Like I told people before that when I was in 7th grade, I took up the trumpet. I started playing the trumpet in our high school band, and our junior high school band. And the reason I took up the trumpet was I loved Miles Davis. I was 13, and yes, I had Bitches Brew, and I had Kind of Blue. So I had, and then I have a lot of Miles Davis CDs over there. I'm a huge fan. Both of his pre-electric period and his post-electric period. And the reason that I started listening to Miles Davis was because I found an album in my house that belonged to my father, and it was Kind of Blue. And I'll never forget. I don't know if you guys know Miles Davis, and Kind of Blue is like, if you say that you like, Kind of Blue is a transcendent jazz album, but it would be like saying that, what's your favorite album? Oh, it's so-and-so's greatest hits. Well, Kind of Blue is a real album, but it's like the most cliche Miles Davis record to listen to, but still. So what? I tell you, there's something about putting that on, and you hear that. There's something in it, man. There's something in it. It's like hearing your favorite guitar riff. When I put that on for the first time, I was 13. I was a Miles Davis fan, man, forever. So check that out. Let's see. This one comes from Gil Cardinal Bavelson. Hey, Laser Bob. You know what they did to Bob? I'm writing to you for a little help, a boost, if you will, rather than an opinion on one thing or another. On the 8th, I installed a window air conditioning unit in my bedroom window, and it gets brutally hot in Kansas, not to mention the humidity. And when I found myself outside on the roof, I went to the lowest part of the roof, about a story up. I sat down and sort of pushed off. 10 years ago, I could have landed it, but at 52, it broke every bone in my lower leg, including my ankle. It didn't break the skin, but it was bloody painful. I have surgery next week. I've been a longtime member of the Post Geek Singularity, and yes, you have been a longtime member of the Post Geek Singularity, and I feel like a member of the family and tribe. The community you've built is my home, so let me ask you this. Would you please shout out my GoFundMe link in the chat for my medical bills? I lost the subsidies for my ACA insurance, and I'm facing insurmountable bills and debt. If you'd be so kind, here's the link to my fundraiser. Now, normally, I would not do this. I would not. But I'm going to, because you are a longtime member of the Post Geek Singularity, and I can't imagine what happened. I really appreciate the help. I should tell you that even before this latest mishap, watching your content took my mind off my chronic pain. You and I would get along great socially. I'm grateful for Robservations and the Robservationists, and for the chat, mods, and your thoughtful critique of film, TV, and pop culture. So if you can find your way clear to pour the link of my GoFundMe to my fellow Post Geek Singularity members, maybe to help with, I'd be grateful. Even a like and a share is as good as a donation. If you can't make a donation, if you'd share the link with the chat, I'd be in your debt. And you'd still watch The 7 Faces of Dr. Lau. Man, you've been saying that for months. I know. We're going to watch it, I swear, on Amazon for whining about movies. I think Ellie Bell would dig that Charles Beaumont screenplay. Thank you for all you do, and have a great show. Well, Gil, because, I don't think I'll do this for everybody, but because you are a longtime member of the Post Geek Singularity community, and in this day and age, you know what? Why shouldn't we help? If we can't help our fellow community members, what good are we? What good are we? So I just put that in the live chat, and there it goes. So it's in there. If anybody wants to help you out, they can. And I hope you're good luck with the surgery next week. I hope everything goes okay. Now, Dean Mikitich sends a letter and says, "Thank you for answering my question on film royalties. It was very insightful. Just to carry on from that question, I take it would be the same for big-name directors, producers like Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, Joel Silver, and Jerry Bruckheimer when they started out. They were paid for the work they did on those early films, and that was it. Due to the success they had early on in their careers, they were able to get financing to start their own production companies. With it being their own production companies now making their own films, they therefore have greater control over them, so they're able to share in the profits being made. Have I got that right, or am I barking up the wrong tree? Peace and long life, Dean Mikitich. Dean, you are absolutely correct about that. What Dean had asked, Dean had sent in a letter and asked about my own career. Like a lot of people get things like residuals on movies and things like that. And I was explaining about, in case you're new here, and in case you didn't know, I love when people set me up for this. I produced a horror film that came out in 2009, called The Hills Run Red. And my company, Ludovico Technique, produced it through Warner Premiere and Joel Silver's Dark Castle Entertainment. And it was released last week on Blu-ray by Scream Factory. And director Dave Parker and I created 6.5 hours of brand new special features for it. But when we were producing that film, we were going to make it independently for a budget of $350,000. We were going to shoot it at a ranch here in Los Angeles, that, by the way, burned down. But we were going to shoot it at a ranch in Los Angeles and make it like any indie horror film would be made. You'd go up and you'd make it as cheap as you could. But we were being given money by a production company. Now, we weren't going to make hardly any money at all making the movie. When you're making a movie for a $350,000 budget, it's not like there's a lot of money to be paying people exorbitant fees. Luckily for us, because of my prior work that I had done for someone at Warner Brothers and a director, Dave and I were able to take the package. We'd put together a package. Dave was directing, I was producing. Writer David J. Scow, who had written The Crow, who wrote Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which is the first movie that I ever worked on. I met him on that. We've been friends for 30 years. So we had the screenplay, we had the director, we had me as the producer, and then we had made a trailer, which, by the way, for the first time, we put the whole trailer. You can see the trailer, the proof of concept trailer is on that Blu-ray. So we made a proof of concept trailer that we took to the studio. So we basically had a viable package. Now, it didn't have any stars, but the talent that was actually going to make this movie was us. The studio agreed. They liked the trailer that we had made. They liked the feel of it, what we were going for, because that's why you make a trailer. You make a trailer, or you have a lookbook. A lookbook is something a director puts together of all kinds of things to show, here's the kind of movie I want to make, so people can look through it and go, okay, instead of me just pitching a story, now you've got a lookbook. What I am doing now, there's a project I've wanted to make for a long time. I am making a story reel of the entire movie, where you'll be able to watch a storyboard animatic of the entire film from beginning to end. I'm even getting actors to play the parts, to do the voiceover. So if someone can go, well, Rob, how do we know? I'm like, here's how you know. Here's the movie. So it's a much easier, it takes a lot of time, but it's a much easier way to get a movie sold. So we did that, and then what we did was the studio agreed. Joel Silver became our executive producer. Now, what that did in terms of film financing, we don't have a track record with Warner Brothers. Dave Scow was a member of the Writers Guild, so he had to be paid underneath Writers Guild rules, so he can get residuals and things like that. But Dave Parker and I, we didn't have that. So what we had, since Joel Silver's company, Dark Castle, was making these films, he, as the executive producer, he gets the residuals. We, Dave Parker and myself, the director myself, we got a one-time fee. We got a buyout. So we were giving up our rights. It's exactly what Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich did with Stargate. When they made Stargate, they had to sell it to get it distributed. They had no more rights to Stargate. So Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, look at what happened to Stargate afterwards. Look at how many Stargate shows were made. They had no control over it. They have nothing to do. That Stargate TV series, the franchise, made tens of millions of dollars, from which Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin made not one dime. Why? Because when you're starting out, in order to get the money, in order to get MGM or whatever to release your film, you have to relinquish the rights. So when we made The Hills Run Red, they said, okay, boys, we're going to pay you this amount of money, which we had to negotiate. And it was, at the time, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a decent amount of money. I mean, it was okay for what it was, certainly based on the budget of the movie. We felt that it was fair compensation. And we knew you're like, okay, we're making this, we were going to make a $350,000 independent movie, but now we're making it with Warner Brothers and Joel Silver. Where's the value? The value is making it with Joel Silver and Warner Brothers. You know, unless you're some iconoclast and believe you're a genius, you go make it for $350,000 and you then try and sell it and get it distributed and all that. But for me, as a producer, as the first movie that I was really going to produce on my own, I would say it was an epic win. And when people say, Rob, you know, and they look at me and I think to myself, well, you know, I might not have the biggest commercial career in my life, but as somebody who, in terms of commercial success, but as somebody who was able to take that movie and turn it into a studio movie, and we made it, and then we traveled around the world showing it, for me, for what it was an epic win. It was incredibly satisfying, and maybe if that's the last movie I produced, I mean, it isn't, but if that was the last movie I produced, I could sit back and go, you know, my Hollywood career, it was all right. It was all right. That was an epic win for me as a producer. But we only got paid once. We never got paid again. Now, when Scream Factory decides to put the movie out on Blu-ray, do we make any money from it? No, we do not. However, when they agreed to let us create 6.5 hours of special features, they did give us a budget. Not a big budget, but a budget. And we were paid to do that work. That was additional work, work for hire. So I had absolutely no problem doing that. So that's how that works. Well, let's see, Dean. By the way, thanks for writing in again. Let me jump over to what you guys are saying. I don't even know where we're at here. I haven't. I'm way back when. Let's see. Where are we? Where are you guys? Oh, here we go. Damo Davies sends in a tip and says, do you believe that Batman Forever under Joel Schumacher would have been better solely if Michael Keaton had respired the role as Batman as originally envisaged? Do you think that a third Burton Batman movie would have been better than Batman Forever? You know, I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that Batman Forever, I think it was a way to reinvent the franchise and keep it fresh. It did very well. Look, for me, I didn't like the over-the-top nature, the comic bookiness of it all. But it did well, and I think it probably it benefited from the change-up. I really believe that. So I think if they made another, if they kept Michael Keaton, I think putting him in a different movie with a different director like Joel Schumacher would have been I think it would have been good. I don't know if another Tim Burton-esque Batman film would have been the best way to go. Lancelot Narian says, Robster, have you heard? Cinema is open in England on July 4th. If they can stick to safety guidelines, no dates yet for the other parts of the country, but they shouldn't be far behind. Well, that's a good thing. We'll see. I mean, you know, I heard today that the European Union, the EU, I guess with Brexit that wouldn't apply to you guys, but the European Union is going to have a travel ban against America because we have not contained COVID-19. It's rising in a number of states. It's actually pretty appalling, but it's happened, and the EU can't afford to have anybody coming from the United States. I think it'd be really interesting, ironic that as the rest of the world was able to come to grips with this, we have not. We have certainly not been able to tamp down the pandemic, and it's scary. But I hope. Look, I want to see Tenet so damn bad. I hope we get our act together because I hope it opens here on July 31st. However, the way things are going now, I don't know if it will. But good luck to you, sir. Damo Davies says, greetings from the UK. When the Joker mentions to Vicky in Batman that Alicia threw herself out the window, did you get the impression that she may have had a helping hand? Oh, yes. Yes, I have. Yes, I did. Absolutely. 100%. I do. Julius A. Goodwin is here. Julius, good to see you. Thank you very much for your always generous support of the channel. One of two. I read an interesting article recently about the racial unrest and protests across the U.S. and the world. It basically said that since they lack leadership to articulate their visions, demands, etc., and advocate for change, there's a risk that they could not make many of them changes needed to change the root causes of this in the first place. In other words, we lack an MLK, a Gandhi, or a Nehru to articulate that vision, and that could cost them in the long run. Thoughts? Well, obviously this is a little above my pay grade, but since you asked, yes, I think one of the real problems, we saw it in Seattle with the CHOP, with the Capitol Hill, the zone up there. Now the mayor is saying they're taking it back. See, the problem is we live in a world now where people have knee-jerk feelings. And I understand that. They get all hot and bothered about an issue, and they want justice. They want their anger to be quenched, and yet real social change, they really don't know what they want. I mean, they have this abstract idea that, yes, we want the police defunded, or yes, we want... Well, that's fine, but you're not really thinking three-dimensionally. What does that mean exactly? We've seen a lot. I mean, there's been a lot of shootings over the last week. 3 people were shot in Seattle at that zone because once you defund the police, you're creating a power vacuum that needs to be filled. I don't think anybody, if you ceded control of an American city to a group of people that they're ill-equipped to deal with everything that's going to happen as a result of that. Like, how do you deal with the tenants that are in the buildings, in the zone you've taken over? Are you now going to assume the real estate payments for those buildings? Are you going to pay the people that own those buildings? Or do you just expect to abscond with all of that? And I think the real problem is, yes, I think when you don't have a figurehead, you don't even have these ultimately, when they make these moves, they're left holding a bag. And what is it they want? I mean, the demands they're making are pie in the sky demands. They're not based in reality. And the reality of things, that's why, look, I joke about it, but one of the things I love about working on a film, especially you see this, I mean, I worked on Superman Returns for a year in Australia. I worked on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for 14 months in New Zealand. When you're watching, and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was an insanely huge production, gigantic. And when you're working on these large productions, what you basically have is you have your production staff that is dealing with how do you move personnel and materials all over the country. You have to shoot in downtown Sydney with 1,000 extras. How do you feed those extras? How do you give them places to go to the bathroom? There's all kinds of logistics that film crews have to deal with, and they have to think three-dimensionally. And one of the great joys of working on a movie is you're watching a group of people that really know how to do their jobs, and they're thinking in 3 dimensions. They understand what can arise. So if you want to shoot a scene, like we want to shoot a scene in downtown Sydney, okay, well, do you want to shoot it on a city street? Well, yes. Well, you can't just take people and shoot with people. You have to have a controlled environment. Are you going to stop that? Are you going to stop the streets? Are you going to block the streets? Then you have to bring in your own cars. Then you have to bring in your own people. And when you do all that, there's another 100,000 questions that get put on top of one another. Well, when you do these things, like you have certain demands to make, you have to understand, like, we live in the real world. Can those demands be made? How can they be done? There's a million different questions that have to be answered, and when you don't have any, the problem is even the people making demands don't know what they want. They're making knee-jerk decisions based on what, and they're making these pie in the sky, and it's really frustrating. I was frustrated watching what happened at the Evergreen State College, where I went to college for 3 years, from 85 to 88, when it was taken over by students in 2017. It's like, really, you're going to a college, you're paying money to go to a college, and you presumably want to go there because of the faculty and what you're going to learn from them, and all of your demands are about what you now want as kids, what you want to have right now. Well, what does that have to do with your education? You want to change the institution that you applied to go to. For what? To like, when did you decide that you knew more than the people that you're paying to go to a school? You occupy the school, and then you make all these demands about how you know better than how the school or what the school's doing. It's crazy. And no, I think these, without figureheads, without people that you can actually talk to. I mean, that was a problem in Seattle. The city council, the mayor, everybody wants to know, okay, who do we talk to? Well, they didn't know. They're now put in a position like, okay, you have to come to the big boy table now, or the big girl table, the big people table, and you have to sit down and what is it you want? Please explain to us how you are going to achieve your goals. Well, they didn't know. So I think you're absolutely right, Julius. Julius goes on to say, at first thought to be a wild conspiracy theory, there is some indication that COVID might be lab developed. What would be the effects if that were found to be true? Well, I mean, as you know, if you read Lawrence Wright's book, The End of October, which is painstakingly researched, even though it's a fictional book, there has been biological warfare experiments going on for decades. For decades. As a matter of fact, I mean, we've been using biowarfare against one another. Humanity has been using biological warfare for centuries. For centuries, whether it was using the plague and delivering it, whether it was blankets or ticks or rats or whatever, we've been using biological warfare for a long time. So the idea that biowarfare and the development of these things hasn't been going on is ridiculous. Of course it has. But a coronavirus, I would be hard-pressed until I get to see actual proof. It's too easy to say that it was developed in a lab, and things have escaped from labs before. But I think that usually Occam's razor, the idea that this probably did in fact happen naturally because it's happened before. But if it's lab developed, hopefully cooler heads will prevail, because COVID is a really nasty respiratory disease. I mean, I don't think people really understand how bad it is. Like, even if you get it and you survive it, it fucks you up. Your internal organs, your blood, it's not the same, and it can take you a very, very long time to heal. It is not the flu. It is not a cold. It's a far worse, far more insidious disease, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. Willow sends in a tip. Hello, Willow. How are you? What is your favorite and least favorite live-action Batman suits? The costumes from Batman and Robin are a celebration of the male form. You know what? I got to tell you, I really do like the bat suits that are in Batman Forever. I love Robin's suit in Batman Forever. If that hot toy gets made, I'm gonna get it. But from a Viceroy of verisimilitude perspective, I really like probably the evolution of Christian Bale's suit in The Dark Knight, because it was a practical suit. It made sense coming out of military hardware, spelunking hardware. It made sense to me. As far as the world that they set up in that movie, I bought off. I liked Christopher Nolan's take on it, because I believed it. Whereas the Tim Burton, everything, the four Burton era Batman films, and I mean going into Batman, the Burton and Schumacher era, those suits never looked practical from a real world perspective, especially in the first Batman. You know, he can't move enough. He can't move his head. How can he fight? And whereas I bought off on the Christopher Nolan suit. And when people say to me, it's so weird because on one hand, as a lifelong fanboy and as an action figure collector, I by the way, I have to say too, I really liked Ben Affleck's suit. Really liked, especially his Justice League suit. I did. I really liked it because, again, it combined, it felt like it had some, like the fabric was carbon fiber or something, and but you know, we want it to look like Batman. We want it to look like a superhero suit, and I think when you make it look too real world, like when I looked at Robert Pattinson's suit, the pictures that came out of him, they to me look like an early evolution of his suit, just like Christian Bale had an early evolution of his suit. So, but I know Batman and Robin. I know you how you like to celebrate the male form, Willow. I know it. I hear you. I know where you're coming from. Kobus says, with reports Keaton is returning for Batman, could Ralph return as Superman on the big screen as well? I think Brandon Routh absolutely could. I think he's got a lot of love. I think Superman Returns has gained in stature over the years, and I think people really appreciated Brandon Routh's portrayal, especially of Superman. And he certainly acquitted himself admirably on the CW. I thought he looked terrific as a Kingdom Come Superman, and why not? People would love it. People would love it. They would love it. Stubble McShave says, one of my favorite books I read last year was Mary Robinette Kowal's The Calculating Stars. I saw that you can get it as a free ebook if you subscribe to the ebook club at Tor Books. It's an alternate history of the space program, and it's well researched. You know what? You're the second person I think that's talked to me about this. I want to get this book. Yeah. Anonymous, that's great stuff. You know what? I gotta put that on the reading list. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, I recently got DC Universe and started reading Commandy after hearing Schnepp talk about it for years. Great comic, and I wish I'd read it sooner. Well, Anonymous, I love Commandy. As you know, can you see it? Yeah, you can. I've got here's the omnibus, the Jack Kirby Commandy omnibus, which I love. So, yeah, I love it, too. I think it's great. Schnepp loved it. God, I miss Schnepp. Oh, hang on. Stubble McShave goes on and says, when it addresses issues, we're talking now about the Calculating Stars, Mary Robinette Kowal's The Calculating Stars. When it addresses issues, it doesn't get preachy and hit you over the head with it. You can read the premise. It's featured after the awards. Ooh, well, since you sent me the link, Stubble, I will put it into the live chat. So here you go. So there you go. There is the link for that. Aram sends in a super chat and says, they should have put a hole in Boba Fett's rocket toy like on pen caps. Yeah, I know. It's so sad. I mean, what a bummer. What a bummer. I don't know what to tell you, but you're right. It sucks. I still want a rocket firing Boba Fett. Marcus sends in a super chat. Well, Marcus, hello. Thank you for generously supporting the channel. Hello, Mr. Burnett from the former home of the Grand Cinemas Alderwood. Thank you for sharing your breadth of knowledge in movies and sharing your love of pop culture. Well, Marcus, as you know, the Grand Cinemas Alderwood, the SRO, Sterling Recreation Organization, Grand Cinemas Alderwood, I was there for the opening when I saw Superman 2. I had a special ticket to go to the very opening of that theater, which I did. And then later, I was very proud, me and my friend Craig Highland and I, he and I were hired by SRO to open what was, I believe at the time, the very first video store that was in a movie theater. And we spent months. I had worked in home video from 1980 to 88. And Craig and I, this was sort of the pinnacle of my work in video stores. We were actually asked to start one for the Sterling Recreation Organization. We were inside the Grand Cinemas Alderwood. And we were able to get video collections, and we curated what we thought was the best collection. Our catalog titles, I think, was second to none. So I was very proud of my time there. I got to find a picture. I have a picture of us behind the counter at SRO Video. It's on my Instagram feed somewhere, but I'll pull it and show it. But yeah, I used to drive there every day. I love the Grand Cinemas Alderwood. I have so many fond memories of going up to Linwood there, and I what a bummer it's not there anymore, huh? Aram sends in a super chat and says, hi Rob, I love your passion and how you express your thoughts. I unsubscribe from the cowards that fired you. You have an amazing heart. Keep up the good work. Well, look, I'm going to say something. People are going to be like, what? I don't begrudge. We live in a world now where everybody is there's so many knee-jerk reactions. I wouldn't unsubscribe to, look, I think you're talking about the Schmodown. I really like the Schmodown. I like Christian and I like Mark Ellis, and for the most part, I liked everybody else that was at the Schmodown. I frequently said that everybody there was so nice, and I really like all the fans. I met so many cool people. It makes me, if anything, it makes me upset. The thing that made me upset is that when people came after me, certain people, and were calling me right-wing and a racist and all this, I'm like, it just made me realize that how they just didn't know me. I was like, I guess the creepy old guy coming in, which bummed me out because I just figured that when you work with people, you have a cursory knowledge of who they are. I mean, clearly no one had ever watched this show, and I feel bad about that. And I'm sorry that there are people that clearly, apparently, didn't like me when I was working with them. And I was having fun. I mean, I thought what we were doing was a good time. So, but please, I mean, I would say that the Schmodown is still, Mark and Christian have created, I think, a good thing. And perhaps I wasn't the right person to be there. I never bared anyone there ill will, and I never said an unkind word to anyone, ever. I just wanted to have a good time, and I did everything I could to support the Schmodown, and I still do. I still support the Schmodown, and if you like the Schmodown, I would encourage you to watch it, because I think what they're doing, what they've built up, is really fun. I mean, it's cool. I'm bummed out that I'm no longer part of the Schmodown. But I would say to people, you know, on one hand, I have no control over how people are going to conduct their business or how they deal with other people in the world. That I can't control. And I think that I was, to a certain extent, greatly wronged. That said, I understand, you know, this space. I got other stuff going on that a lot of people don't know about. You know, they don't. I was just the crazy old dude that's wearing his jacket and screaming and yelling all the time. People wonder, I mean, they wonder, like, why is this guy doing this kind of stuff? Because, you know, people don't, it's all knee-jerk reaction. Nobody looked into me. It's just like, oh, wait, I'm going to be branded this way. That was disappointing. But I would say I very much appreciate your thoughts, and I very much appreciate that. But if you like something, you know, I wouldn't want you to unsubscribe because of me. And I think that the Schmodown itself has a lot to offer. And the people there, I'll tell you one thing, like this community, at least for the most part, the fans of the Schmodown are pretty great people. I met a lot of really, really cool people. Gerald sends in a tip and says, I would like to extend warm welcome to all the newcomers checking out Robservations while John Campia's show is on hiatus. Thank you for coming. Well, I appreciate that too. You know, what's so funny is I didn't realize how many people from the John Campia show never watched my show. I mean, John has me plug my show every time. You know, I'm always like, hey, come over. But it's different than John's show. Maybe this part's not different, but you know, I try and do different things. But yeah, I'm glad anybody that comes over from the John Campia show, I hope you are enjoying yourselves. I think we have the best community on YouTube. So thank you for that. And thanks, Gerald, for supporting the channel. Damo Davies sends in a tip and says, forget the science fiction triple feature you're completing this week. Have you watched all the sci-fi movies of yesteryear referenced in Science Fiction Double Feature, the opening song from Rocky Horror Picture Show by Richard O'Brien? I believe I have, but I would have to go back and look. Hang on, let's see. Since you asked, let me look. Let me get the lyrics, because I don't remember. I don't have Marianne Butler here to sing the whole song for me. Let's see. And I can tell you. Because that's a good question. That's a good question to ask. Let's see. Science fiction double feature. I got to get the lyrics. The lyrics. Here they are. By Richard O'Brien. Michael Rennie was ill the day the earth stood still. Yes. But he told us where we stand. And Flash Gordon, yes, was there in silver underwear, but they're referring to the serial Flash Gordon, which I've seen in silver underwear. Claude Range was the Invisible Man. I've seen that. Then something went wrong. Fay Ray and King Kong, yes. Deadly It Came from Outer Space, I've seen that. Dr. X, I've seen that. Anne Francis in Forbidden Planet, yes. Tarantula, yes. Day of the Triffids, yes. When Worlds Collide, of course, said George Pal to his bride, I'm going to give you some terrible thrills. When Worlds Collide, I just ordered that on Blu-ray from Australia, which is great, so I've seen that. Again, Dr. X will build a creature, see androids fighting Brad, and back to... Yes, absolutely, I've seen every one of those movies. 100%. I can say that. So there you go. And having just checked the lyrics, Damo, there you go. Stub McShave says, Batman news may have made me care about the Flash movie, but I don't care about the Flash character in the Flash movie. What I care about is the possibilities of the Batman character. If they fail to deliver substantially on Batman, people will react negatively. I'll tell you why I'm kind of excited about Flashpoint and the Flash. Because this idea that you can right a wrong, everybody wants to go back in time and prevent something from happening. And I think that's inherently interesting about time travel or alternate universes. And I think if they do it right, it can be pretty badass. So I'm looking forward to it. JPR PH1 longtime imagination connoisseur, says, did you see Doomcock's latest video today that further expands the idea of Disney somehow making the sequel trilogy part of an alternate universe? Yes, I did. So, okay, what he is talking about is there's this thing called, I think it's called the Veil, or the Veil of the Force. It was introduced in Clone Wars, that you can go through time and space, time travel, that kind of thing, alternate universe. They've introduced that, and they can actually use that to negate the sequel trilogy. They can go back and reboot it. Interesting idea. From my perspective, that will never happen. It will never happen. Because the thing is, they're not going to relitigate that again. Carrie Fisher's passed away. They're not going to go back. They're not going to go back to Harrison Ford and say, no, we got to do it again. Now, maybe, I mean, who knows? Never say never. But they made their 3 movies. I think they're going to own their 3 movies. They're going to reboot and do something else. I just don't. But then again, ladies and gentlemen, we live in crazy times. I never thought Michael Keaton would come back for a Flashpoint movie. Although, you know, I'm going to go on the Zod Rider podcast tonight, and we're going to talk about the Snyder Cut. And people are going to probably come at me, and he's going to come at me. Well, why did you say that you didn't think the Snyder Cut would ever happen? Well, the world is in a constant state of flux. So what I was saying for a long time was I never believed that the Snyder Cut was ever going to happen. One, because the Snyder Cut would cost tens of millions of dollars to make, which I was saying. And 2, who's going to pay for it? Who was going to pay for it? And it wasn't just me. I'm speaking as somebody that works in the industry, who's produced films, who understands how the industry works. It's like, there's no way the Snyder Cut was going to happen. Then, situations changed. HBO Max, as someone pointed out to me, maybe it was Brian Eng himself, said on November, I think it was November 23rd or 24th, 7 months ago, I even said that the Snyder Cut could happen if HBO Max paid for it. Now, there are all these people that want to say, you said it never happened. It wasn't like I didn't want it to happen. It was just I was speaking about the realities of the industry. 20 years ago, I would have said, you can't make Avengers movies. Nobody's ever going to do that. And I could be on record as saying that I never thought somebody was going to do that. You know? So, that doesn't mean that those things don't change. Obviously, they did change. So, yeah. But yeah, I just don't think that they're going to negate the Star Wars trilogy. Remember, Force Awakens made $2 billion. The Last Jedi made $1.3 billion, and I think the Rise of Skywalker made over $1 billion. They're still, that's very successful. That's a good track record. Why would they negate them? They happened. What they got to do is move forward and start making good Star Wars stuff. Trexway sends in a super chat and says, Jolan True, Rob. Jolan True. For those of you who don't know, that is a Romulan greeting. Have you seen Edward James Olmos' interview where he says he likes to think that Blade Runner and Battlestar Galactica were in the same universe? No, but I love that idea. I mean, they could be. Although, I mean, it would make sense. Look, the human Cylons as a adjunct or evolution of replicants, I can believe that. But I don't know. But I like that idea. Alexander Wilson says Tyler Perry has made like 99% black themes and movies, and he is very successful. That success allowed him to purchase, build, and create one of the most profitable studios in the USA, where many studios like Marvel has used. Blacks have money. They do. And you know what's really interesting? What's really interesting is Tyler Perry did all of that, as you pointed out, making black themes and black movies. And also, he's done all kinds of plays. I mean, that guy is a machine. And I really admire him, as everyone knows who saw our whining about movies about Gone Girl. I loved his portrayal of in that movie. He was great. I think Tyler Perry, whether he's black or white or whatever, again, Tyler Perry is one of the great producers, geniuses that's ever worked in Hollywood or Hollywood Atlanta. Tyler Perry is an amazing guy. And what he's done, I mean, I want to go to work in that studio facility. It looks incredible. It's huge. I mean, what he did is amazing, and he did it on his own. You know, and no one told him that you can't do this because you're black. He embraced his blackness. He made things that appealed to the black audiences and made a fortune. And like you said, Alexander, blacks do have money. And this, again, I hate to say it because I'm not black and I didn't grow up with this, but, you know, I don't understand. Like, there's a guy who's completely self-made. Why isn't he being held up as an example of, I mean, I want to be Tyler Perry. I think the man's amazing. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, my father was a basketball player at Loyola University in Chicago. He wrote a paper where he worked hard and got a B. His white classmate got an A+. He compared his paper to his and couldn't see how it was better. He went to the professor, and the professor said that he doesn't give black people A's in his class. Well, this is the BS a lot of people have had to deal with. How many centuries that people start at third where minorities start at home plate? This was in the 70s. There is no equal playing field. I agree with you. I've said that on the show from the very beginning. I said there's never been black equality anywhere in the United States. Anywhere. However, that said, there have been people, like you brought up, Tyler Perry, who have succeeded despite that. You know, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, I look at Tyler Perry and I'm like, Tyler Perry makes me think I haven't worked hard enough in Hollywood. Because that guy is a machine. And whether he's black or white or straight or gay or from the 28 known galaxies, maybe he's an alien, I don't know. But I can look at a man that I can admire. I admire his work ethic. I admire his work as an artist. I mean, I might not like the Medea movies that much, but I can understand why they work. But I just admire him as a man. I admire him as a human being. And I think it sucks that your dad had to put up with that. And that is bullshit. And that's what we're fighting against. I mean, that's what we really need to remember is we've got to get rid of that kind of bias. And as I've always said, talk about academia. What do we need? We need the most well-educated and healthy population in the world. Why the United States doesn't have that? All of our troubles. There are the three things that we need to deal with in this country that are the root causes of all the rest. Education, income inequality, and health care. Those are the things that we should concentrate on. You want real equality? We have to make sure that every kid in America has the best education they can. And if you're in an economically challenged area where there's many broken homes, that's where more money should be spent. We need the best teachers in there. We need the most money. And until we're willing to do that, we're full of shit. This country is full of shit. Unless we want to educate our population, we want to make sure they're healthy, and we get rid of that income inequality where every child does not have to live in poverty. Every child has a roof over their head. They have good food so they can go to school and get the best education. Unless we're willing to do that, we're full of shit. And you know what? There's not going to be, we need teachers that are incredibly well paid, that don't have chips on their shoulders, that don't have to pay their own money to get school supplies. We're one of the richest countries that the humanity has ever seen. Why don't we have the most well-funded, well-paid teachers, the best schools with the best after-school programs, the best equipment? Until we're willing to do that, we are full of shit. Same with healthcare. Until healthcare is not a for-profit system, begins and ends there. Jason Buenos says, Batman Returns is my favorite. Otherworldly vibes. I love Batman Returns. I really do. I love it a lot more than I like the original Batman because it is otherworldly. It's weird. It's like a horror movie. It's a horror movie meets it's like a gothic horror movie with crazy characters meets a superhero movie. A spectator sends in a tip and says, people can be so obnoxious here in Vegas. 1 month ago, I walk out of my vehicle with a mask and some ding-dong says out loud with his friends, that won't do anything. Now infections are increasing here, and the governor is mandating wearing masks. Yeah, I mean, again, I understand that the economy needed to open for political reasons and for economic reasons because people were going to starve to death without getting money. But you said it, a spectator. Again, you know what? Again, all of America's problems, all of our problems, well, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them, great education, great health care, and let's get rid of poverty and income inequality. Let's lift our people up. And I don't mean socialism necessarily. I mean giving people the tools and developing their talents so they can make of themselves what they want. Mukbang says, did you get to the 2 Mandalorian episodes yet? The one on music was amazing, but so is the one for props. Would love your perspective. I have not. You know what? I'll try and do that tonight. The problem is whenever I have free time or I'm not working in here, I'm watching a movie with Elizabeth for Elizaviews. I'm so behind. Sean M. says, in the super chat, and says, Rob, have you heard about what's your take on the Foundation series coming next year on Apple Plus? There's a teaser video that was released yesterday on the YouTube. Sean M., I'm deliriously excited for the Foundation. I grew up reading the Foundation trilogy. Now, there's already people bitching about certain gender swaps of characters. Look, this kind of stuff doesn't bother me, like gender swapping characters in classic science fiction, because in the far-flung future, like when let's face it, science fiction has evolved, and when you had a bunch of white dudes writing science fiction for other white dudes to read, I get it. In the time it was read, it doesn't, gender swapping, as long as it, Liet Kynes in Dune, doesn't bother me. Depends how it's done. Great characters, great story. I looked at that trailer for Dune, and I got to tell you, I mean, I had blood flowing to my special parts of my body. You know what I'm saying? That I'm so excited for this. It looks like it was done with no expense spared. I hope it's great. It looks terrific. I mean, what a tough thing to adapt. I don't know. But I can't wait to see it. I'm very, very excited. I found out that the trailer dropped on this show. People were sending in chats, have you seen it? And I'm like, what? No. Very excited. Very excited, Sean M. I want to see more of it. Again, we live in amazing times. Who would have thought that we would have got a Foundation series on Apple Plus? Come on, man. I mean, it's crazy to me. Nothing, anything is possible now. Anything is possible. We live in, we imagination connoisseurs, we are living in great times, my friends. We're getting a lot of cool stuff. Honest Asian Guy is here and says, hey, Rob, I recently rewatched the 1992 cyberpunk classic Nemesis, and it was way better than I remembered. Considering that Albert Pune directed it, it's a sharp-looking film with awesome FX and decent acting. Have you seen Nemesis, and what are your thoughts? That's with Olivier Gruner, right? I think. I like Nemesis. I saw it. The first movie I ever edited was Albert Pune's Arcade. Miles Winton was actually the name of the original editor's dog, and he gets editing credit. The dog gets editing credit, but it was the first movie I ever edited, and he directed that. So I watched Albert Pune's movies. I like Sword the Sorcerer. Nemesis, it was fun. I haven't seen it since I saw it once in a theater, but I liked it. I didn't think it was great, but I liked it. Kazam sends in a tip and says, who do you think the genius at Universal was that greenlit Doolittle on $175 million? No one cares about Dr. Doolittle. Hollywood wasting big money on uninspired IP like Terminator, Charlie's Angels, and Men in Black. All of those are corporate decisions, lazy decisions made by studio executives that want to dip into their IP and hope they have a hit. I mean, in my mind, it's more embarrassing to lose out on an IP like Men in Black, Charlie's Angels, or Terminator than it is to lose out on Doolittle. Because on Doolittle, look, you've got Robert Downey Jr., and on paper, if you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Robert Downey Jr. is probably the most bankable star in the history of Hollywood, if you really look at his box office. So, and that's just with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it made sense. Why you'd hire a director who's not used to doing those kinds of special effects? I mean, again, corporate decision-making, that's the problem. Hollywood, they want to make these big tentpole properties, but they don't work. You can't do that. It's never going to be done. So, unfortunately, and look what they try. Charlie's Angels, Men in Black, Terminator, let's do that. Why? Everybody's seen those. Make something new. If you make something new that no one has seen before, you might hit it big. Then you're a genius. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, many public school systems are funded by property taxes. The best schools are in the wealthy communities because they get the most resources from the taxes. That's where you need to begin in education reform. You skipped one of my messages. I did? First of all, let me get this one, Alexander. Yes, You're absolutely right. The more affluent neighborhoods are the people that need the money the least. We've got to go in. That's why I understand property taxes where I come from, we had an incredibly well-funded public school system because it was very upper middle class. Now it's much more than upper middle class. It's a very wealthy area, but all the schools were always funded. But you're absolutely right. We can't do that anymore. We need to mandate our schools on a federal level that has federal money, because we have to start thinking about education. We need a Manhattan Project with education. We need to teach, not just teach for the test. We need clear thinkers. We need kids that have all kinds of after-school programs, whether they're arts programs or sports programs or music programs. In my case, I got to write for the newspaper, which we got to put out and we had to make. That was kids need to be able to explore where their talents, where do they, I mean, you're absolutely right. And we need to deal with that. You want to make America great again? Let's start with education. That's the beginnings of everything. That's the beginning of wisdom. Now, unfortunately, I mean, can you imagine if we had a group of young people that were protesting, that they were critical thinkers and they really understood? You had people that were as smart as Martin Luther King Jr. out there. I mean, I'm sure there are. I'm not putting anybody down. But I have yet to hear, we have all these protests and all of these people, and there are some great people out there. But where is the leader of these movements, or leaders? Where are they? I mean, they're fragmented. There's a lot of different leaders in different places, but we need figureheads. We need very smart people. We really do. And I agree with you. Hang on, let me go find your chat. Was it down further? I think I don't know if I see it. Maybe it didn't come through. Tyler Perry. Oh, here it is. When they say you come from a cis white male view, that really means you come from an ignorant view, which I agree with, especially when you said the USA has never been disconnected. But did you forget redlining, Tulsa, Jim Crow, Emmett Till, and church bombings? No, I didn't forget all those things, and I think about that a lot, actually. But I don't know if I explain myself as much. I think that what I mean to say now is, I think that we used to know a lot more about those things. We were more aware of them as a country than we are now. And I think that with all of our social media and all of our communications, and we should be a lot smarter about everything than we are, because the information's at our fingertips to find all this stuff out. But it seems like we are I don't know, more disconnected than ever. At least that's the way I see it, the way I feel about it. But I don't think that, I think it's wrong to I could say there's a lot. I deal with a lot of people every single day that tell me about the movie industry, and I wouldn't necessarily denigrate their points of view or say, oh, you're ignorant, you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I'm going to go on a podcast tonight where I'm going to talk about the Snyder Cut to a bunch of people that want to tear me limb from limb for saying what I said about the Snyder Cut. But I would say to them, well, your opinions are based on false assumptions and things like that. It'll be interesting. But I mean, my point of view might very well be ignorant, and I admit that I don't know everything. But I do try and keep an open mind. What I really don't like, though, is now I live in a world. I never thought I would live in a world where simply for now, I guess I'm getting a taste of what a lot of people have felt their entire lives. But now, not only is my view, indeed my entire existence, is being dismissed. And I don't think that's a way forward either. That is not making us, by rising up, by allowing other voices to be heard. If you're then going to, as I always say, if you're going to replace one oppression with another, I mean, you're just keeping oppression going. I've always said we have to move together. We have to move up together. We have to solve all these problems together. Otherwise, we're just spinning around, and so we're just rats in a maze or on a little wheel that's going back and forth and back and forth. Julius Goodwin is here. Still. Thank you, Julius. When I say I believe in a square deal, I do not mean to give every man the best hand. If the cards do not come to any man, or if they do come, and he has not the power to play them, it is his affair. All I mean is there is to be no crookedness dealing. That was a quote from then President Theodore Roosevelt. I know that quote, and that is a great quote. I love that quote. But that's true. I mean, but the problem is, what we need is, when it comes to this, and I understand to bring it back, there are people in this country that never learn how to play poker. You know, and what we want is a well-educated population. So when that well-educated population sits down to play, when they sit down at the table and they've got a hand of chips and they've got a bunch of dreams, they know how to play poker. They know, because they're going to deal with a bunch of people that are much better than they are, that are just waiting to take all their chips away from them. What we want is to give people a fighting chance. There are people in this world that have no chance. They don't even understand poker. But people are perfectly willing to have them sit down at that table and take their money. It's a great quote. It's a great quote. By the way, thank you for, again, supporting the channel. I appreciate it. Dan V sends in a tip and says, the article you read speculated about Affleck's Batman dying, which was the plan for Justice League Part 2. It would have been a good send-off to bring in Keaton later, but it is unlikely at this point. If that was planned out, it works. Yeah, no, I agree, but who's to say that there isn't a... Maybe they will do reshoots. You never know. But it is a good question. It is a good question. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a lot of letters that I have still yet to get to. But you know what? I'm going to leave you. I'm going to take you out with. I'm going to play one more video I got from David Atkin. David Atkin sent in this video. So take it away, David.
Been watching you since the AMC days. Just like to show you some of my collection. It's my Michael Jackson Hot Toys, Mandarin from Iron Man 3, a Dalek from Doctor Who, my favourite Terminator Hot Toys, Thor from the Dark World, Wolverine, Iron Man, Tony Stark, the Captain America and Iron Man, and these Japanese figures from the show JoJo's Bizarre Adventure I think look really cool. Got the Michael Jackson figure arts from Tower Records in Tokyo. Back to the Future VHS Blu-ray set. Got these cool Arrow bucks from The Hitcher, Sergio Martino, Ghost in the Shell, Man Who Fell to Earth, Blair Witch Project, a Philip K. Dick book, Forgot Stories in and Pictures, and Chain Melody. Some of my favourite cult films: Audition, Visitor. Well, I wouldn't say it's my favourite film. Pulse, which is a really good Japanese horror film. Wolf Guy, which is a Sonny Shiba, really cool 1970s film. All You Need Is Kill. Robo Geisha, which is just a really fun Japanese film about turning geishas into robots to fight. Life Force, Dark Water, the original one, the original Gundam series, and the Star Trek steelbooks, which are, I love the artwork on these. Invasion of Body Snatchers, the 70s one, or 80s. Coffee, because I love Pangea. We've got this cool Back to the Future lenticular photo from the film. Power Rangers communicator, and it's also got the original Z Ranger Super Sentai logo on. 007 car from You Only Live Twice, which is my favourite Sean Connery film. The candy tin from Grave for Five Lives, the Ghibli film, and cool bobblehead, Vincent Price bobblehead. So my Blu-ray collection. I've got some cool figures from the anime One Piece. There's this Scrooge McDuck bust. I've recently got a projector which is really cool, so I'm watching observations on that from this cool Avengers art print on my 18.
That's from David Atkin. I want to thank David for sending that in. As you know, if anybody wants to share their collections with me, David, it looks like you got a great Blu-ray collection. I have to say, I like the fact that you have a bunch of eclectic stuff. I too have The Visitor on Blu-ray, and I loved seeing that you have the Arrow Pulse on Blu-ray, Kyushu Kurosawa's film Pulse. I'm a huge fan of that. I love seeing how eclectic your collection is. It's kind of like the Robservatory. It's just full of an eclectic bunch of stuff, and slowly but surely I'm getting closer to doing, well, to show you more of this place. And I want to thank you for sending it in. I'm going to bring an end to the 450th episode of Robservations, the show about something. I have a lot more letters to read. I'm behind on letters again. But I want to thank everybody for sending them in. I want to thank everybody like Torin. I want to thank BL Alley, Trinidad the Island Man, and of course David for sending in videos that are a lot of fun. By the way, Trinidad, I love when you send in videos like on the beach. Very serene. Thank you for that. And BL, you're pretty funny, dude. I saw what you did there. So thank you guys for taking the time to send in videos. If you'd like to send in videos, I will play them on the show. But remember, please don't put in music that's copywritten. YouTube has available music that's free of charge to use that you won't get copyright strikes on, because some people have sent me videos that I haven't been able to play because they put in like rock songs or something, or Queen. I'm like, I can't do that. So please get license-free music and put them on your videos if you want to use music. So I very much appreciate that. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Haynock. I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank Jordy Lyons. I want to thank Greg Smith. I also want to thank Mike Bodden. Thank you guys. And if you want to go over to the Post Geek Singularity Facebook page or the Whining About Movies Facebook page, look up the Richard. And he's always showing something cool. I want to thank everybody that generously supports this channel. Thank you very much, whether it's financially or whether it's writing letters. People take a lot of time to write letters. I got a lot of great ones coming up. So if I haven't read your letter in the last couple days, have no fear. I will get to it soon enough. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will say this. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I will say, like I always say, have a better day.